Welcome to the UNPAK Podcast, the podcast for operators by operators. I'm your co-host Vignesh, a partner at Sierra Ventures.
Hey everyone, and I'm your co-host Arvind, a partner at Geodesic Capital. Today we have a fantastic guest with us who's also deep into the AI world. But before we talk about his current product and what he's building, obviously he has spent a number of years in that space in business strategy and finance roles. So we'll let Parker, CEO and founder of Numeric, speak a bit more of that, and also help us understand about what they are building in the office of the CFO suite. With that, Parker, welcome, and maybe would love for you to sort of help us understand a bit of your own background, how you sort of were doing things and then led you to have that aha moment. All right, I got to build something in this space now. So over to you, Parker.
Yeah, and Vignesh and Arvind, thank you so much for having me. Really a pleasure to get to do this. So I guess a little bit of a quick background about myself personally. I went to school in North Carolina and then joined a pre-revenue startup straight out of school. It was founded by a Duke alum who I'd gotten to know. And maybe that's not like the most normal thing to do, is like join a 4-person startup that has no product, no new real business model, candidly, like no real idea what we were doing, but was just a blast. And, I think I'd probably still look back to that experience and enjoying that sort of like nascent stage as a big pull in terms of why, it felt comfortable and sort of exciting to maybe jump back into it. After being there for a few years, I joined a 8VC-backed business called Hearth in the home improvement space that was founded by Anthony Goen and Joe Lonsdale. And that was an awesome experience. Really joined kind of right after the company had found product market fit. So we were really hitting our scaling moment. So we were growing the team aggressively, hiring a lot in sales. The revenue every month was just our best month for, just felt like, rinse and repeat. And so that was a real privilege. And so joining that was a company right around the Series A, and joined as sort of like kind of notionally the first finance hire. Although I will admit, like I had no idea what that was supposed to entail. I don't think anyone at the company really actually knew what it was, except for the fact that there was kind of a growing body of operations and finance and sort of general work that needed to be corralled and maintained as that sort of business, became increasingly real. And I think that was an awesome, just an incredible experience. So for a number of reasons, and sort of led to starting Numeric. I joined in January and was told, kind of to my surprise, showing up, that the first project of mine was going to be going through a financial audit. That was not told to me during the interview process, nor do I have any accounting background. And so arrived and was told that the Markham team would be in our office, in the next month in February, starting their financial audit. This is a fintech company. We were running a marketplace for lending products. We also brokered insurance policies. We had purchased one of our competitors the year before. And the accounting was an absolute mess. I don't think anyone knew what was on the balance sheet, why it was on the balance sheet. And so that was a real kind of trial by fire. I spent the first 6 months at that company learning accounting by sitting in a room with auditors. This was also pre-COVID. So this was like, we had a team of auditors in our office every day for months on end. And honestly, there's maybe not a better way to learn accounting than to just sit there with them and understand what are they looking for, what do they need, and to get into sort of that rhythm of just going down the balance sheet and understanding, cool, how are we going to go substantiate the fact that, and get comfortable with, this sort of financial picture of this business. I genuinely used to just leave every day by sort of asking them what they were going to need tomorrow. And then I would, exit the conference room. They would say software capitalization. And I would Google software capitalization on my phone and, stay up all night sort of reading about it and writing a policy. And I'd show up the next day with some questions. And I was just such a fun way to learn and sort of understand, okay, what's sort of required from that. And in kind of an interesting way, I also think that sort of put the business in a good position and foundationally to go, from that moment onwards, really start to get some rigor and religion around, okay, how do you go maintain this posture? That was not an experience I wanted to go through again, of sort of needing to clean everything up and fix everything and, just go through this really messy process. So, in many ways, it's why companies start to really adopt a lot of month-end close processes and things I'm sure we'll talk about, which is cool. How do we start to develop a sort of ongoing, continuous posture of always really being audit ready and having accurate, complete, financial information? So I loved that experience. I loved getting to grow with the company, hiring some amazing people, watching them up level our finance and accounting functions, and really just enjoyed the learning process, of getting to go tackle new problems and really sort of leverage this finance function to kind of propel the business forward. So a lot of learnings from that then sort of led into starting Numeric, why we started it, how we think about the world, and kind of the problems that we're solving today.
Well, I appreciate you providing that context, Parker, and maybe two kind of questions here related to the founding journey around Numeric. One, which is, you obviously come from a finance background and you're more on the problem side, and obviously, I know, being from Duke, you understand the importance of teams. And so, how did you kind of go about picking the right sorts of co-founders to complement you as you decided to go down the path of building a software company? Like, that's part one. And the second part of it, from a timing perspective, how did you kind of think about the right sort of timing to launch Numeric?
Yeah, so I think the on the first one, it has been such a privilege to get to start this business with Andrew Beal and Anthony Alvarez, my two co-founders, both of whom I went to school with. We also worked together at the first startup I joined right out of school. So these are two close friends who I've known for a long time, and I think I can't imagine honestly doing this without them and this experience it would be, because it just feels like a privilege every day to show up and get to build a business with them. I also think in a very healthy way, we all have very different strengths. There are things that each of them are leaps and bounds better than me at what they do, and I wouldn't even try to keep up. And then there are also places, unsurprisingly, where I'm really effective and kind of really find my lane and my stride. And so I think that's enabled us to move very quickly. And, having a shared background and sort of shared respect and work history has just enabled us to go, right from the off, really move forward, with a level of trust and respect and efficiency. And we've made so many mistakes along the way, and we've learned a lot, and all of us are doing things we've never done before. But it does make life so both easier and enjoyable when there is that just sort of shared trust and kind of collaboration together that we're really in it together. In terms of like the timing itself, I think a lot of stars kind of aligned for it to be the right timing for us to go start a business together. I think, personally on all three of our fronts, we were all at sort of a juncture in our careers where we were thinking about what did we want to do next? What did we enjoy in our last roles? And we started a process, which was just thinking critically around, would we want to go work together? And I think we definitely sort of took things one step at a time, which was, starting to think through the questions of did we, after it had been a few years since we'd worked together. So did we still like working together? Did we enjoy the process of going and starting to talk to accounting teams and controllers and finance folks? And was that an audience that we enjoyed working with? Did we think we had some hypotheses that would bear out in terms of, a product vision and a perspective on how these teams and these products should work? And so we certainly didn't kind of just jump in, off the deep end day one. I think we're relatively methodical about sort of taking things one step at a time. And eventually I think there sort of hit a point for all of us where we all just sort of realized we were starting to get obsessed with it. We were starting to go to sleep at night thinking about the problem, thinking about what we wanted to do. We were waking up, just excited about what is possible. And once that sort of you kind of hit that point, it was okay, we should go do this and kind of jump fully in and start to take this as a really, sort of serious venture.
Hey, thanks for that, Parker. I think, you recently, earlier, mid of last year, perhaps, kind of raised your Series A. There was a great round and great set of co-investors. One question we do like to think about at the early stages of company building is, How did your first set of customers kind of inform, your view of what numeric needs to be? And often it's a fine balance, right? I mean, you want enough of a signal to demonstrate that this is a product and a capability that many customers would want, and not, just end up building something for customer X. Um, and yet you want to be doing as much as you can for that particular customer that has taken the trust for you with you, right? So if you could comment on that journey with the early customers and how that has impacted your product roadmap, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. Two or three thoughts on that front. One, I think we were very fortunate, and I think this was part of kind of being in the sort of startup finance ecosystem. Was we found some kind of clever ways to go find our first handful of early customers. We found early adopters where they were in Slack groups in different forums, and so we were able to sort of get a really quite quickly sort of initial cohort of really kind of credible people and companies. And sort of validate just ideas of like, hey, this is a problem. This is a problem that you also agree isn't being solved, by another company or product, in the way that you and I think about it. And so we were able to kind of start that evolution and sort of problem kind of understanding. And I think something we also did right out of the gate, which I'm very appreciative that we did, was we signed contracts with everyone in terms of the amount that they were going to pay. And we did that negotiation up front. But then we also didn't start charging anyone until we agreed that we were delivering the value that we were kind of aligning on. So I think we kind of found a nice balance, which was like we really didn't want to just have design partners who didn't have any skin in the game, who weren't invested, who didn't have some level of commitment. I think we had a real phobia of like spinning our wheels, only to then learn that companies we were working with just didn't care about the problem. And so I think we found a nice balance, which was saying, cool, like you're going to have to go sign a real contract, go through a real procurement process. But we also for instance, didn't have any integrations with an ERP. So we had like no way to actually deliver the product we were looking for. And that sort of gave us a nice window of time then to say, cool, great, like let's go work together on building the product. And then, we can align on sort of when is the timing feel right to go start actually billing you and sort of starting that payment cycle. And that to us felt like a nice cadence for us to kind of control some of the variables, but also, have that sort of pressure and realness to making sure, that we're solving the right problem. I think one thing that if I was going back, it would do differently is I would probably look to charge 2 or 3 times the amount that we charged. I think we probably would have learned a little bit more and got a little bit better signal about some of the problems that we ended up kind of moving into and solving, had we sort of set a higher threshold for sort of like, what is that contract amount going to be for, call it sort of a mid-sized company? Because that was sort of a learning that I think we went through kind of months later, was then sort of understanding, okay, cool, we need to be charging 3x, 4x what these sort of first contracts were for. What do we need to do? And that definitely sort of changed our roadmap and changed some of the pieces and ways we thought about things. And I think if I look back, we could have done that a little earlier and got some of those learnings a little bit faster.
So this actually sets us up for a good topic and a good next topic around AI. And, maybe let me frame these questions by calling it building a deterministic software, or building stochastic software for a deterministic world. Obviously, in finance, you can't afford to screw up. Things have to be right, precise. Otherwise, customers can't trust you. But, to your point about being able to 2x, 3x ACVs, AI has been a pretty common way to be able to drive not only velocity but also price. And maybe the best place to start, Parker, if you could just give the audience a little bit of a layout on, how does the actual system work? Because you obviously have integrations with ERPs on one side, then you have your RPA and your kind of agentic processes on the other side. How do you kind of get it all to work together and actually work accurately in this world?
Yeah. So maybe sort of taking a little bit of a step back, I think, in terms of what Numeric actually does today, I would sort of argue our mandate is helping finance and accounting teams make sure that their data is complete, it's accurate, and really it's as actionable and useful to the business as possible. And so we would sort of consider anything in that realm like something we want to go tackle and help improve. And a lot of that work sort of naturally falls today, one, in accounting teams' worlds, and two, sort of as part of this close process where teams are doing a lot of these sort of recurring workflows to review the underlying data and make sure nothing's been misclassified, is missing metadata, to book kind of month-end adjustments and make sure all the accruals are in place that are kind of non-cash movements, to, confirm that everything is saved and downloaded and they have the audit support, right, ready for their auditors to substantiate things. And then to start that process of now communicating externally, whether it's to the finance team, to the board, to external parties. Okay, now what happened, right, with our retrospective information and data. So we sort of view that as kind of like the sort of general kind of problem set. And so in terms of how the software works, one, we will integrate underlying raw financial data. So we're looking to get, really a high volume of underlying transactions and as rich context as we can about that, to then obviously help with the process of then, these companies making sure that database is complete and has all of the context that the business needs out of it. We will then build different tools. Some involve AI, some don't, to help teams then move through these workflows as efficiently as possible. So, we continue to sort of add in different data sources, add in different systems, and again, sort of hopefully can drive down this process such that, on any given day, on any given hour or minute, ideally, companies can have kind of complete confidence that, the financial data they have is correct and can be consumed by, business stakeholders.
Thanks for that, Parker. Maybe if I can sort of take it 1,000 feet, right? I mean, what are the building blocks that might be needed by your ICP? And you should let us know and let the audience know what your ICP you define as at this stage, for them to sort of benefit from what Numeric is offering. And, I think somewhere you had called out that, subledgers are like the super glue of financial data. And so how does that sort of influence, how you guys build a product from grounds up?
Yeah, so I think, so in terms of our kind of ICP and audience, we really work with companies that have anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple thousand employees, both private and public companies, businesses like Brex, Plaid, OpenAI, these types of sort of scaling kind of growth businesses. If we take a big step back, I think I think the CFO suite at large is really plagued and hampered by the challenge that financial data is distributed in lots of different systems. If you think about just sort of a tech stack that a CFO might manage, this now encompasses everything from your cap table to your credit card systems to reimbursements to billing products to leases that you track, right, to loans you give employees. And the exciting part is a lot of that data has now been digitized by really awesome point solutions. The products that you can get to go solve any individual type of transaction are now really great. Like that's been one of the awesome proliferations of just the volume of software is there's so many great tools out there, which has brought a lot of this information online that used to just live in documents. The challenge is there isn't really a system that kind of actually reflects this new reality. And so what ends up happening is you end up with all these Excel files and all these sort of bridges and duct tape that people kind of use to glue everything together, right? And I think that point of a subledger is a very good one, right? A subledger is, sort of a register for some type of financial transaction that is sort of validating, the balance sheet account and sort of, the information that's managed there. And so we really think that if you really want to solve a lot of these underlying problems, a lot of the sort of forward sort of finance looking problems too, you really should start fundamentally with this financial data infrastructure and with this accounting information to build hopefully the most complete and most actionable set of information across the business. If you sort of go into any finance and accounting function today, you might think that this is sort of one team that operates on sort of like one field. And I think what you'd really actually see in practice is like two teams on two fields that like don't really only talk to each other like, very infrequently. That's a bad analogy. But like, you will have your finance team operating in a planning tool. You'll have your accounting team probably operating in an ERP. And the level of sort of friction because of the fact that these systems are not managed particularly well together, they're not unified, really causes a lot of the problems. And so I think when we think about our goal here, it's certainly to make sure that the data is complete and sort of audit ready, but it's also to try and collect as much of that underlying financial data to make it as useful to the business as possible. And that's definitely one of those things that's really exciting about AI is that like this gives us new tools to think about how do you compose these databases? How do you build these different types of tools and ledgers and systems that or wasn't possible without AI. And then it also gives you tools to go make sense of all that information, right? Whether it's sort of synthesizing information to write explanations, to leave commentary, to answer questions in the business. And so you sort of see AI being kind of used throughout that system. I think like lease accounting is kind of a good example for maybe this. If you think about a business like Numeric, we have two leases today. We have an office in SF and an office in New York. And if we want to account for that lease, in order to do so, we need to go through a number of processes to kind of find the kind of gap, appropriate expenses for our rent across the durations, the timelines, and whatnot. And so we have a spreadsheet, like most companies, where we will sort of outline all the calculations to get to those credits and debits. And if you want to, you can go buy a point solution to go, that is kind of accounted for every edge case of every lease under the sun, to go kind of model that into a product and then to create the credits and debits. But, now just going into ChatGPT or one of these tools, you can go spin up a web app to go account for your leases with pretty much like no lift today. And it's probably going to be 90 to 100% correct in terms of the calculations, and creating essentially a mini product and application for you to go say, cool, here are our two leases. Now here is a 0 to 1 kind of application and widget for us to go create for that calculations. And that's like this, it kind of throws like the classical software paradigm on its head, right? It's like the arbitrage of sort of designing a product to serve every lease under the sun is like, might no longer make sense if every company can go build their own lease accounting product, right? And that's really interesting because it starts to just give you a different set of tools to think about how is this ecosystem going to be built? What is that going to look like? And it does feel like it's going to look very different than these systems look today. But at the same time, it also still feels like it's really early. And it feels like there's a lot of scaffolding and a lot of like working around the limitations of models today that you have to do to make some of these things work. But I would also expect a lot of that just to continue to change as the models progress. And I would say also, I think in accounting, we've seen that like the new reasoning models perform way better for many of these use cases than the models prior in terms of just how much better they perform in terms of, generating calculations and sort of performing on the quantitative side of things.
So that all makes sense from a I guess technical innovation perspective, what you're seeing on the model front, and in the world that you are going after, there's a lot less glue that I guess you need to deal with and legacy stuff that you need to deal with. I think I remember you saying on another podcast recently that you just signed your first public customer. Obviously, to go after somebody like that, that's going to be different, and it's definitely going to be very different when you go after a much older, larger legacy enterprise. And so I have a couple of questions for you on how do you kind of think about implementation on that, in a customer like that, and especially when they've already made a lot of investments to kind of make it work well for them. Like, where do you find the seams for Numeric? Is kind of one part of it. How do you get the implementation right? And then the second part of the question is, to get a customer like that up and running and ready to be able to use your product quickly, are there things that you've been able to build that, like for example, you're not going to obviously replace their entire GL, but it's like, hey, I'm going to go in and replace this specific function, and that's my wedge. Like, just talk to us a bit about your strategy of how you kind of Pac-Man your way into selling into those enterprises. So how do you implement them, and kind of how do you land with them, so that you kind of effectively are able to move up market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's one that we've learned a lot about, and I'm sure we're going to go learn many, many more lessons, and probably look back and think that some of the decisions or strategies, like, could have been better informed. But I think I think one of the things we really love about this space and this sort of problem set is like, it's so tangible, it's so real. You have accountants and accounting teams every month going through so many repetitive tasks and processes. And so when we think about sort of the product design in the ways, we see this actually in many implementations that they don't all follow a sort of uniform set of steps. Like I think back to one of our early customers, Betterment, and the first month we worked with them, all we did was sort of work on tracking their close process, tracking tasks, making sure their team was up in the product and getting some value out of it as quickly as possible. And the nice part about that is we can do that in a day. You can upload a checklist, you can get started, you can just go to our website, sign up and get going. And you can, and that's useful. That's better than what many, many companies have. And then you can get into, okay, like what's the next pressing problem we want to go solve, right? What is that sort of component Pac-Man piece you want to go bite off? For many companies, that's been tackling variance analysis processes. And we sort of found a sort of problem set, which is like, accounting teams typically are writing a lot of manual explanations each period about what changed in their finances, whether this is for purposes to go inform other stakeholders. This also oftentimes relates back to certain controls that they have, where they're saying, hey, for any change in our finances, month over month, quarter over quarter, and different cuts of information, someone actually must go explain this because we're going to go vouch to our auditors the fact that we've done this and this is a control of ours, right? That's like such a great example of like where AI can be really impactful, right? We're sitting on all of the underlying raw metadata and transactions about, that is hitting this company's general ledger. And so we found that AI is very good at sort of explaining those changes, and the more tools and sophisticated systems that we can give people to control, those explanations get better and better, and they start to put this on repeat, and now we can add a lot of value. And then we can sort of move on to kind of the additional sort of components and pieces. So I think taking a very sort of modular approach has given us this chance to actually, in some circumstances, land with one product and expand to a second or third product, within months or a year, right? Other companies, unsurprisingly, they want to buy the whole thing and they want to go make a bigger buying decision. And I would argue it's sort of our job to not have a preference, ideally, and to listen to our customers and understand, okay, what's going to make this the right experience for your team, your priorities, your roadmaps. And so that's my sort of push, right? It's like we have a large burden on us, which is like we are a small company. We are a fraction of the size of our competitors and, of many bigger businesses. So it's on us to make our customers feel comfortable working with us. And you do that in different ways, right? You do that by listening to a customer and understanding, what are the problems they're going to solve. You do that by, demonstrating in different ways that you're going to have the best solution for those problems. And then you do it by, figuring out a plan together that's going to make them feel good about the fact that you can service their needs and at a growing scale. And so, it's been a really, like fascinating journey for us. And I think it's amazing how much easier it is now than it was a year ago when you're sort of like just getting the first couple started. And, but I really think, again, it's like, it's important to sort of make sure myself and our sales team and our whole company understands the fact that like, they are trusting us with some very core workflows, and we should be very respectful and very receptive to how do they want to think about that game plan and that strategy, and then we need to go map to that in many ways.
So let me maybe just ask the counter argument to that, which is, obviously, like the easier way to get in is to say, hey, we'll start small and then expand. And I assume, a lot of people do end up buying that way. But, in some ways, the real value of a Numeric comes when you get broader deployment and you kind of really drive that like true business change. And I'm curious if you're finding that now that AI has come to the forefront, now that we've seen more success, if you're starting to get people that are more willing to understand and try broader deployments, or do you think people are still kind of feeling their way in terms of, we'll try something small and then work our way up from there?
I would say I have a hard time predicting. If you told me going into a certain sort of sale or conversation, what's going to be someone's preferred route, I'd probably be wrong half the time. And I think a lot of it comes down to, again, like companies sort of roadmaps, their priorities. When, accounting and finance teams have a lot of implementations and system works that they're always doing. And so, I think we should back ourselves and our software and our ability to provide someone an awesome, high value, quick time to value experience. And so my push to our team today is like, I think we should try and land and expand at every opportunity and feel really comfortable and go back ourselves, and shame on us, essentially, if we can't go expand that into a broader relationship. But then there are plenty of companies, where they are, if they're going to make a decision, they want to do everything. And I totally understand that too, right? And in many ways, we would hope that our software can increasingly replace a number of different products and tools. So I don't know today if I feel like there is a particularly right way. We've seen success in both. And I think it sets a good benchmark for us, which is like, if we have customers where we've landed a small early contract, but there's a clear upsell opportunity to go double, triple, quadruple it, which like increasingly we have many of those. Like, I think that's an awesome opportunity and sort of rallying cry for our team internally to understand, look at the clear revenue opportunities that we need to go win and earn that trust. But if we do so, you can see that sort of ROI really quickly. So today I continue to take a perspective. It's also, I think, probably just a competitive perspective, right? It's like we want to get in everywhere as quickly as possible, and whether it's large or small. Even with a free product, right? It's like we offer a free product that we now have some enormous accounting teams using, and I find that like kind of frustrating, but also kind of great, right? That's a lot more touch points that we have with folks around the world, in accounting circles, using Numeric, seeing our brand, understanding what it looks like to work with us, understanding what the bar for our quality looks like, and this is the long game, and we want to be here and servicing these companies forever, and so the more foundational and sort of widespread we can become, I think that's a good investment to make.
Thanks for that, Parker. I guess when I've been increasingly thinking about the companies built in the last decade, or generally in the SaaS kind of world, right, which we're all very used to, but this whole agentic AI kind of creates a new paradigm. And then let me give you a preface and then see if you have any response to that. In the past, I guess you buy a software and then you sometimes will need to have deployment services to kind of fit your organizational workflow into that. But with agentic AI, there's an opportunity whereby you can dictate how the agents map to your enterprise workflows, right? I mean, and so it's almost like, following a wave, right? Does that apply to the space that you're operating in? Do you think that will also mindful that finance and everything is more rigid? There's certain structure in the way you got to do, and so maybe the software of the past has already taken care of that. How do you think about that? Any observations there?
Yeah, I do think there are depending on the industries, and I do think in accounting will have its own sort of flavor, right? It's like there is a need to test things, to control things, to be able to understand, if I'm putting an input in, what's the output I'm gonna get. And so I do think this is the space where I think you're probably gonna sit somewhere in the middle of this, where you're gonna see sort of use cases on the edge and on the margin, and especially I think with deeper models and deeper quantitative skills, we'll see interesting applications. But I would argue, I think I think the exciting trend is around how do companies have software that better reflects their business in very unique, custom, simple, sort of elegant ways. Like I would almost say it's like I think what characterizes an accounting team is like 1,000 spreadsheets. It's like files and files and files of data that shows, okay, we're doing a program to let our employees, take out loans to issue their equity. Okay, what's all the data about that program? Well, that lives in an Excel file right now. That lives offline. That is not information that's used by anyone to go think about the business. And I think that ability to take these files and the information and sort of almost turn those into applications that are very unique to a business, that's just like such an interesting and sort of compelling version of how do these softwares start to look. And so I would hope that you can get to value really quickly. There's also, you can, now take these sort of messy, unstructured data, and use LLMs for onboarding purposes. So I would hope that you can get to value a lot faster. But I don't think this is quite a world where it's just going to be the Wild West, of anything goes. And, generally in these spaces too, these are not the spaces that you just see the like, 0 to 100 million, like overnight sort of like high growth, like businesses. These are places where it's like, this is a buyer that demands trust, that wants to understand that you're going to be around, that wants to make a thoughtful and intentional decision. And so I think there's also sort of components to, who are the types of companies, people that you're working with, and what are they going to demand out of a vendor before they make a decision. So I don't know if that quite answered your question, but I do think we are really, really early in sort of, introducing AI into finance and accounting workflows. Like I think we are still in the earliest innings of, and I think a lot of that is because the models have only started to really recently get good enough to sort of be reliable in many of these more quantitative workflows and processes.
Yeah, I take your point there. I mean, there is, if you think about hallucinations in the baseline model, that kind of creates, you don't want
Yeah,
missing zeros in your ledger balancing. But
totally.
I guess there's scope for workflows that is touched by humans, right? And sort of enabling productivity improvements in that. I think that's the kind of theme that I'm seeing in when I look at growth companies, and I think that's what you're pointing towards. Maybe uh, uh, not really related, but shifting gears a bit to product around, you know, and how you would think about when is the right time to sort of switch on the second product or third product, right? I mean, because I think as you go into your customers, you're probably already facing a few demands, right? I mean, a few aspects. Um, what it could be early days, but what has historically, in your past, but also now maybe in numeric, you are seeing to that informs your timing of all right, maybe now is the time to sort of put some product build and associatively sort of give more things for your sales reps to go and sell.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's such a good question, and it's one, I think first and foremost that every team and company should be very intentional about. Your ability to control your sort of resource allocation is just paramount to actually being able to go become the company that we want to build, which is a generational, really foundational business for the CFO suite. Um, uh, I think you can already start to see, even at the earliest days, how just like that pull always in inertia gets back to the short term focus, iteration, next step. Like it's just inevitable, right? It's, when you have customers, when there are things you can improve. Um, so, uh, I think we, as a company, as a team, and philosophically, would bias towards like you should start way earlier than is comfortable. Um, and it doesn't need to be a complete overhaul of how you work. But I also think but I think you want to start taking certain resources, certain people, certain efforts, and really entirely focusing them on sort of the next product, the next act, the next, meaningful kind of, revenue generation sort of like feature. And I think that's really challenging. And I think one of the reasons to do it early is to like develop that DNA and muscle culturally, which is like, what does it look like to have people from very early innings working on like almost completely different time horizons, and like almost give yourself a chance to like get it wrong once or twice, like very quickly, and just see how like how hard it is. It's very painful if something in your kind of product offering that's live could be improved, but you have a handful of your engineers working on a new product that you don't expect to see the light of day for a year. Those are just really hard dynamics to culturally figure out how do you foster that. And I think the reality of being a business, in this sort of, era is like, you do have to go multi-product earlier. Like, I think you need to go, so you have more competition than you ever have had in the past. You have other players. So you need to go scale those offerings and uh, to go sort of increase the size of your products certainly earlier than you needed to a decade ago. So I think we believe that Numeric, like the best version of Numeric, like is very much a multi-product business. And so I would say I would say for all of 2024 and into 2025, we have always been intentional about having some number of resources working on new product offerings that have no production requirements. Um, and it has been messy, and again, we've made mistakes, but I think that sets us up for understanding what does it take and what does it look like, and I think that's just so critical for how we think about going forward. Where we plan to probably not incubate just one product, but probably two or three, going into 2025 and 2026. So uh, but I think every space is going to differ, right? And I think everyone needs to understand and sort of think critically around, what does it take for them, to get to like a billion in revenue, and in some spaces, maybe you can do that really on sort of one product and sort of a much later sort of expansion. I think in this space, you got to go pretty early, and you got to go sort of set that foundation that you're going to go tackle a broader set of problems for teams, and start to bundle, probably realistically multiple products into your offering.
Yeah, but I think Parker, you touched on a couple of interesting company building points, which I think is always hard, especially in the early stage. And you've kind of gone through this journey, and so you've probably seen it. But I think a lot of times you can't just decide one day that I'm going to turn on second SKU and hope that the second SKU picks up. Like you kind of have to set it up a year, a couple of years in advance in order for you to understand the customer, get the customer comfortable with what you're building, and your reps are probably out there pitching roadmap stuff as well. And so I think the lesson that that the listeners should take away from this is there's a method to the madness, and it's not just deploy all your resources on new stuff, but find a way to be methodical and tactical about trying new things. On that note, I have a question for you about competition, and especially in a category like yours where it's not like you're the first person, it's not like you're a category creator. And yes, in many ways you are a new product, but you still have the presence of the NetSuites and the Blacklines and like the very legacy and the more recent legacy players that are going after the same sort of customer and same sort of budget. And I have a couple of questions for you. One, as you see the chess pieces, I guess, being moved around the table, and I'm sure they are talking about their AI strategies and their agentic strategies and so on and so forth. How do you kind of think about outmaneuvering them? Is there something from a product perspective, an agent perspective? And look, and we don't need you to spill the beans on what your roadmap looks like, but I guess what I'm trying to do is level out and just try to help the founders that are listening to the podcast understand how to think about problems in their own category and how do you approach it. So one question is around product strategy and how do you set that up to make sure you stay ahead of competition. And then the second question is, I'm sure in your market that you're going after, there are folks who are more aggressive and folks that are less aggressive. And are there partner strategies or other strategies that you're taking that help set yourself up to be able to outcompete the more aggressive players in your space?
Yeah. I think they're they're both great questions, and sort of speak first to maybe sort of like the product strategy and road mapping one. We do have competitors, and I think I personally, like, I grew up playing a lot of team sports. I think this is like, you know, there's sort of fundamental ways to compete well, and that is to like be respectful, to be to go out and compete and do your best as possible, right? And you want to leave it all in the field, and then you want to go, ideally sort of have a drink with folks and be friends and hopefully do it right in the right sort of spirit and manner and way. And I think I would hope and expect of my team that we continue to do that. Uh, and I think in terms of like how do you think about sort of your roadmap and your product and staying one head? I think all of this in many ways comes back to talent density, and that maybe feels like a little bit of a cop out answer, but I think we are really obsessed and maniacal about, like, are we assembling an incredible group of people who have deep subject matter expertise, who feel empowered to go make decisions, to go think critically about the business. And as we grow the team and as the company, are things accelerating? And so in some ways, like, I care a lot more about, like, are we increasing our capacity? And in many ways, like, that almost hopefully enables us to like make worse decisions in some ways because we have the ability to move faster. But obviously we want to pair that with really intentional and sort of thoughtful sequencing of like, what are we doing and when and why? But I would tend to come back to a perspective that it's like, it's our job and our goal to go bring together a company and a culture and a group of people who can move at a pace that others can't match. And if you can do that, over some period of time, like, you're going to go out accelerate your competitors. I think we will also sort of be very intentional about like what we want to build and how that aligns to our roadmap and what we won't. We will not be the most feature rich product offering that like someone will look at when they are assessing options. Like realistically, we probably have half of the product surface area that maybe some of our competitors have. That's probably being generous to us. We have to have the things that like our lane that we are really, really good at. And that's, what we win on. And for us, that's all comes back to the level of financial data, the correctness, the accuracy, the systems, the infrastructure to support, really complex businesses and hopefully drive to this question, which is like, we're going to have better products and tools and services for you to make sure that your data is accurate, you're complete, you're more proactive about that. And sort of, kind of defining the box, right? In the sort of swim lane that like you're going to go, out execute and out operate in. And that just means saying no to a lot of different things. There are 101 features that don't fit inside that box that our customers would really like us to go do, but they're not sort of doubling and tripling down on kind of, I think, our competitive advantage to what we do really well and really uniquely. So that is sort of something which I think, like, going into this, I didn't quite understand, like, realistically how many times you'd have to say no, all the time. Like it just feels like you say no all the time to different things that, you could go build. But I think we have hopefully been very thoughtful about what we say yes to and how that aligns with, sort of the broader strategy of what we really want to be good at, what we want to be known for, and how that sort of compounds on the advantage and what we really sort of excel at today. Yeah.
I guess kind of you alluded to team and density of talent, right? I think it's a nice seg to help us understand, or the audience understand, about what is the archetype of people that would thrive in a space like this. I mean, whereby it's, it's a known category. There are, buying cycles could be longer because, it's a virtue of the people who are buying it, right? They want to test it and they want to be sure that this is the
Totally.
right thing. But of course, that's on the selling side, go to market side, but also from a product build point of view, and that playing that tango between GTM feedback into product, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think sort of similarly in terms of how you think about sales and, the sort of like ICP in your target. Uh, you should be like, it's our job to be really, really focused on what a good sale looks like. What does a good customer look like for us? Like our goal is, like, Numeric today is not to be the best product for everyone, right? It's like, we want to be the best product for a certain segment of companies. And we should feel very happy sort of telling folks that we meet that we might not be the right fit for them. And to some extent, we have like some control over that. It's like, we could go build a new integration and open up a new part of that TAM. But that would then have a constraint on, the resources that we need to go spend to do that, to the breadth of customers we want to serve. And so again, it's like, I think that comes down to being like very intentional about like, who are the customers we're trying to go service. Long way of saying, like, I think you should be equally focused on like, what is that ICP of like an employee, and what is the experience and what are we trying to provide people that make this a really good fit for them. And you should be really narrow and really intentional about that. And I think probably narrower and more intentional than most companies are. And so I think we have a really good idea of like what someone, what the attributes are of someone who's going to be really successful here. And the reality is that, like, it's not most people. Like, Numeric is probably genuinely a pretty bad place for most people to work. Like, but I think our goal is obviously for the subset of people that we really want. We want to be the best company and not just a good company for those people, right? Same for our product. It's like, I think they're very, analogous.
And can I press on that a bit? I mean, to see if you could guide us to think about a couple of characteristics that sort of you look out for, I guess, when okay, this is the person we need on our product team or our go-to-market team for this space.
Yeah, I think there's a good sort of guiding almost question across the board that we would have, which is like, is this someone who you want in a room with you when you're working on a hard problem? And I think that's like a very good kind of benchmark because it both speaks to, is this someone who's intelligent, who's thoughtful, who's a good communicator, also someone who's just going to like positively contribute to the environment, and someone who is going to be, a positive sort of, function for not just yourself, but for the whole company. So when we think about who is a good fit for Numeric, we will happily trade on experience all day long. We are not looking for the most experienced folks. We are looking for people who are going to learn quickly, are going to care a lot. That's sort of like I think the best people for an early stage startups are people who have that sort of obsessive trait of like, you're going to go to bed at night thinking about that sales call, thinking about the feature you're working on, thinking about the marketing campaign. You're going to wake up the next morning and like get out of bed quickly, like excited about the fact that there is nothing standing between you and getting better and helping the team and moving the ball forward. And there's that sort of proactivity and agency that I think you I don't think you can teach. I don't think you can force. I don't think you should even try to. in many ways. I think you should just try and create the best environment for those people to go do their thing and to give them as much responsibility and ownership as quickly as possible. And then to candidly like move people out of the company who don't, kind of, in our circumstance, like exhibit those characteristics. And I think that sort of, again, it's like intentional about a certain way to think about a company, an archetype of an employee and a sort of, Numerican, right, that works here. I don't know if that's a term we're really going to go with, but it's the best I could come up with. But I think it's just like that's one profile, and like companies are successful hiring all sorts of different profiles of people. I don't think there's not like a one size fits all company like or category, right? Like we're in person. We are looking for people who want to be in person all of the time, like 5 days, 6 days a week. Like we're in person. That's going to rule out a ton of people who don't want that, and that's like totally okay. So I think again, it's like so much of it comes down to like the narrowness. Can you get really narrow on who we as a company, we have 30 people, right? It's like, who can we serve really, really well? And who's going to be a good fit and who's going to have fun here and enjoy it. And sort of not almost kid ourselves that we can offer too broad of an experience yet. And obviously, as you get bigger and you can scale, you can start to scale that out. You can start to have like we have very little management, right? You can start to do more of that as you grow and as you scale, and you can start to provide almost like increased diversity of like the experience that you can provide people. But especially at this stage, it's like we'd rather be really narrow on what that looks like and really focus. So hopefully we can do it ideally better than any other company our size, right? And we'll be really competitive about the fact that we want to be the employer of choice for people who want a certain type of experience. And we are so happy when people self-select out of a process because they're looking for something different.
Yeah, I guess no, thanks for that. Maybe we're into the last leg of our recording here. So maybe if I were to shift gears and ask you, given the space again you're playing in, how would you take out your crystal ball and tell us a bit about it? What do you think the future of finance could be? This is a big one, and I'm very curious as to where you may take this. But just, I guess you're operating in a space that is very deterministic, right? But let's just expand the scope perhaps in office of the CFO, right? Where that could go and powered by AI, I suppose. Maybe I'll hand over to you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would argue that I think we should be primarily designing systems where agents, are the users, and they're not people. And I think that sort of does inform a different way of thinking about where do you prioritize your efforts. And there's going to be a lot of balancing, which is how do you sort of take the latest tools at your disposal, the new best LLM, and roll it into a product where you're providing value tomorrow. But then also, how do you think really critically about the products and systems you're building, such that as you project forward years and years and years into the future, it really is probably mostly agents that are interfacing with your software as opposed to potentially people. And it's a really different way of thinking about what you're building and where the future is going. But I think it's such an exciting one because I think there's just these systems are going to look and feel so different. And I think that's mostly in a really good way. I think finance teams are going to have an ability to surface more insights to business partners, to be more of that brain and sort of hub, faster, more accurately, more in depth than they do today. So we're really excited. And I think we would also raise our hands and be like, we're to some extent just guessing, like these models and the sort of new tools and systems, like, really I just feel like you're in a bit of a constant flux to figure out, what is the world's going to look like, right? There are plenty of folks out there who believe software is completely dead, and, why would you even invest or build any software anymore, right? Like, and I don't think we would go to that extreme, but I think there's like real reasons to think that we're in for some really radical transformation. And if you're working with folks who you think really highly of, who you're really enjoying spending time with, I can't really imagine a better time to be starting a company and running it, because it just feels like there's going to be so many opportunities for so many companies to really rethink a lot of systems, a lot of products in ways that just haven't been possible yet. So we're having a lot of fun doing it, and I'm sure we'll get a lot wrong, but I think the future of finance is really exciting, and one that we should be hopefully driving towards, and hopefully Numeric is known as sort of pulling us into that future.
Um, so I think, look, obviously, I think not only you, but your investors and a lot of other companies are excited about where this world is going. I have a more kind of broad question about how companies end up getting run and how these finance teams getting end up getting built and getting organized. Look, the I guess there's one school of thought which could say that, do you need, I don't know, X number of people to run a finance organization anymore? Maybe not. Maybe you only need 50% of that. And look, obviously, I know you're not in the business of putting people out of a out of a job, but like I'd love to understand, like, for your customers that buy the product, like, what is their view of their finance organization going forward? Is it that they're just unable to find people? They just don't want to keep bringing on more people? Like, why, I guess, why Numeric? Why now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we hear increasingly from customers and teams that they have some of them have explicit goals about sort of reducing their headcount and sort of budgets in finance in maybe not this year, but in sort of a couple years out. And so I think you're already starting to think and see internal operators thinking really critically around, are there places where they can be more efficient? And we would definitely hope that and think that we can do that. And I think that for accounting as an industry is probably really timely in the sense that there's a real shortage of accountants. The profession does not have enough people joining the profession to fill all the open roles. So I think we are going to see teams that operate a lot leaner. I think you're also going to see people needing to operate in almost like a more full stack kind of manner, right? Like you see a lot of folks now where their roles are, they're an AP clerk, right? They're a staff accountant working just on a certain type of transaction. But I think you're going to see people where those roles, you start to step back and you're much more of almost a systems architect, right? You're thinking about the data flows and the processes and the underlying pieces, and you're dealing really with exceptions and reviews and making sure the technical accounting is right. And so I think there's like in most industries, like a really interesting question of like, how do people get trained? What does that look like to be a junior accountant? Really different. You already hear that from people, which is today it looks really different when you have these AI tools already than it did even a few years ago. But I do think we're gonna find that these teams operate with fewer people. And those people are much more savvy and sophisticated in terms of thinking about the overall system and how that drives business value. And I think that should be a future that we're all really excited about. I also think there's like trends of like and really interesting questions of like where will people outsource more, right? I think there's certain breakpoints today where it makes sense to bring finance in-house and sort of accounting in-house. I think there's good reason to believe that point may shift later, right? If you can get better, higher quality service at a fraction of the price, like you may actually outsource more than you used to. So there's really interesting questions of like how these trends and these pieces will change. But I think like it's not going to happen without really great software, really great people thinking critically about where are the actual opportunities to go, double down and invest in and sort of provide people with new product experiences to do so. And again, I hope that like we can be a company that sort of really pushes on that and provides people with some thought provoking ways of how these systems might look.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to kind of close out the meat of the podcast with kind of thinking about what the future of this looks like. And just as you were describing it, in some ways it feels like the what we saw in the old world, where it was like, you have the DBA kind of goes away as you have managed services, the folks that are managing on-prem servers, that kind of goes away as you get to the cloud. And you've not really had that in business functions. But you're right. I mean, if you don't need to do the manual work, folks that are in accounting should be able to do more business related stuff, whether it's, hey, how do I get people to pay faster, or other sorts of operations that can be done that are a little bit more strategic. And I think it's a super exciting time for a lot of companies. But I like the overall message, which is, how do you help the people become more system designers rather than kind of manual task doers? And I think the companies that can figure that out, that I think they have a real chance to win. At the end of our podcast, Parker, we always like to have a little bit more of a personal touch. And this is both a question of, just to get to know you and get the audience to know you a little bit better, but also a question, I think, for the founders out there. We like to ask how you decompress. How do you take the time to recharge? I mean, it's really important. How challenging it is to be a CEO. How do you kind of take time off? How do you step away from it to make sure that you're mentally charged and prepared to go at all times?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think it is one that I have managed with varying levels of success, over the past 3 years, if I'm being totally honest. Sometimes it's easier for other people to see that you've burned out in different ways, and it takes going on vacation and getting offline for a week to realize that you needed probably that break a little earlier. Um, but certainly sort of trying to strike that balance. My goal right now is like if I can get a day a week that I'm outside, whether it's cycling, skiing, running, hiking, right, uh, away from a phone, like that's what I need, and that's what I need to recharge, to step back. It's also often where times you just end up doing your best thinking, is like when you get that chance to decompress a little bit. Um, and so for me right now, it's like that sort of has started to become a bit of a ritual, is sort of one weekend day a week. Trying to leave the phone behind and get outside and get some sunlight. Recognizing that, kind of candidly, when Monday comes, like the schedule is kind of its just own monster, and you're going to be at the whims to some extent of, what do you need to do to move the business, aggressively forward. Um, uh, so yeah, it's trying to get some exercise and getting outside.
Well, I appreciate that, Parker, and maybe at some point I'll get your thoughts on Cooper Flag and how you feel the Duke basketball team's doing. But appreciate you taking the time, and
Definitely.
thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate you taking some time out of the day, and thanks to all our listeners for taking the time to listen to our podcast. And we hope you like, listen, and subscribe. Thanks.
Thanks, Parker.
Thank you.